So I was thinking about a thing today when I was driving home from work.
Okay, well, what was the thing?
I was thinking about superheroes.
Okay, that's a pretty normal thought.
Yeah, I mean, we think about superheroes a lot, fair. But what I was thinking about was, if superpowers started to exist in the real world, how would that be treated, like, speaking governmentally and through, like, laws?
I mean, that's an interesting question in the grand scheme of things.
I know that like, there's been like a lot of media that has, of course, explored like, what if superheroes but real? And I'm not saying like, what would be realistic legislation that would happen if superheroes were real? I'm saying right now in our world, superheroes start existing.
Okay. Superheroes or superpowers?
Superpowers, technically,
Because that is not the same
that is a
thing.
complete that is
Right.
sort of really the hinge of what I'm arguing, or at least proposing, I suppose would be a better word.
Yeah, we haven't started to argue just yet.
No, not yet. We'll get there.
All right.
Superpowers. Superheroes does a weird whole ethical morality thing, which honestly makes more sense as a fallout of superpowers beginning to exist more than a base presumption of the world.
Okay.
Superpowers start existing. Obviously, one of our first analogs that we can look at is probably Chris Claremont's run on X-Men, right?
Okay. I'm not particularly familiar with that one, but I assume that...
How about just X-Men in general?
Yes, X-Men in
Let's pull
general.
it up a level then.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, are we... Because I immediately jump into Civil War.
That is the second sub thought there is
Okay.
the Civil War era type.
Right.
You know, you've got X-Men obviously brings up mutant registration,
Correct.
which then just snowballs into the superhero registration that was Civil War 1.
Right.
Or superpower registration.
So let me ask a clarifying question.
Oh, please.
So how do superpowers start? So we have, if we look at, again, like fiction, so there are two thought processes that would cross my mind for that.
I'm going to cut you off at the knees with my answer, which is, let's go with the Marvel route and say it doesn't matter. It could be genetic. It could be caused by outside sources such as radioactivity, blood gamma, blah, 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 a sludge ooze that turns turtles into people.
Okay, but that doesn't actually answer my question.
Oh, okay.
So my question is this a single traumatic event that begins spawning? Like, do we have a point of origin? Like, strictly like, hey, a meteor hits, superpowers start? Or is this sort of like the gradual evolution start? What's your thought?
I'm going, again, sort of the Marvel route.
Okay.
In the presumption of, look at, say, a Marvel 1602, if you remember that story, where, and spoilers for Marvel 1602, which is a great comic book.
Yes, it is a great comic book. One of my favorites, in fact.
Definitely read it. Marvel 1602, which is, what if Marvel superheroes, but 1600s instead of 1900s or 2000s?
Right.
Aughts? 2000s. Whatever.
Yes,
1900s.
aughts would be aughts. Well, 1990s, yeah.
Essentially, well, because superheroes technically... Well, I guess it depends on which universe. The point, I'm off on a tangent.
Right.
And the conceit of Marvel 1602 is... Oops, Steve Rogers went through a time portal into the 1600s, and now superheroes start showing up because superheroes showed up too early, like, ontologically speaking.
Right.
So let's say there's, quote-unquote, some sort of ontological trigger where, like, okay, superpowers can start existing, whether that is genetic, quote-unquote, evolution, or, wow, suddenly for some reason, radiation is now actually causing Spider-Mans.
Right.
As opposed to just killing people.
Well, I bring that question up because if we're thinking about from a real world perspective, you know, if we have like a single triggering event, let's again use like my meteor thing. We're gonna immediately be kicking things off from like a government control perspective.
Yes.
Because that becomes an emergency situation where immediately something happens, and then there has to be an immediate government reaction because something has happened.
And that's the reason that I'm going with more of an ontological trigger instead of a, like,
an emergency situation or otherwise.
Like a actual, like,
spawning
diegetic event, if you will.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Because I think it's more interesting to look at how do we deal with the legislation of superpowers than, hey, what are we going to do about this meteor that's causing superpowers?
Well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of interesting legislative questions on emergency.
That's not
that's
not the aspect. I'm more interested in the moral, ethical, and legislative ramifications of superpowers.
Okay.
And if I'm going to just sort of like put the cart back behind the horse and bring out the horse here.
Okay.
A lot of where my thoughts immediately started wandering is that, hey, in X-Men originally, it was X-Men, obviously it's extremely allegorical.
Right.
Originally it was very allegorical for civil rights movement in the 1960s. It is now, then it evolved into being allegorical for gay rights in like the 90s. Now it's sort of evolved into just like human rights in general, but there is this very specific trans allegory that is happening in X-Men.
Yes. Which has already been a topic they've discussed in depth, depending on the comic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at the new X-Men 97 cartoon that was just coming out on Disney Plus, where they were like, yeah, by the way, Morph always has been non-binary. Deal with it.
Right. Or even characters like Mystique, who, while certainly female, can transform and has shown proclivities regardless, overall for that. Which
same,
and done very healthily, generally speaking, despite the fact that she's been a villain. But
yeah, I mean, that's sort of the unfortunate thing with writing a piece of entertainment.
Right.
You need an antagonist.
Correct.
And then, of course, we could start going down the rabbit hole and start discussing the whole, like, oops, villains starting to make a little bit too much sense. Time to make them do something awful.
Well, I mean, that's X-Men's problem, and has been X-Men's problem for forever. When everyone's a freedom fighter, everybody's going to be the good guy, and everybody's going to be the bad guy at some point.
Except for the fascists.
Well,
the fascists are always the bad guys.
That's true. I mean, everyone is always up for punching Nazis.
Absolutely. Except for the Nazis.
Well, I don't know. It depends on your Nazis.
Well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But bringing us back to the superhero thing and talking about, like, the trans allegory of it all.
Okay.
And looking that it's not a direct parallel, but it is interesting to sort of try and take some of the things that have been going on with trans legislation.
Okay.
And how can we map that to how superpowers would be treated and how that would be approached, honestly, from differing political ideologies. Because if we're in America, it's not just going to be legislation. It's going to be democratic representation legislation.
Correct.
Which means that we're going to have people running on platforms and people are going to vote for those platforms. So what are all of those, that spectrum of political ideology? What does that look like in a world in which superpowers exist? Especially if we expand a little bit of other allegory and look at the way that there is gun legislation for what is a lethal weapon. Right. How does that apply to superpowers, which are lethal abilities innate to a person? What does that then wrap in when we start thinking about martial arts versus firearms and the way in which, quote unquote, hands are a deadly weapon in the proper form of training?
So I think entertainingly, the manga anime My Hero Academia probably takes a route that I find most American, which is very funny from a Japanese.
It was going to come up at
comic.
some point.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, because it has all structure. Like they don't talk about it a lot, but there's a lot of structure in the back end of My Hero Academia that kind of talks on things. Where, in that particular universe, everyone's superpowers are called quirks.
Right.
And at the point of the story, like 80 to 90% of the world's population has superpowers.
Right.
And 10% do not. But they live in a very regulated society where using your powers in public, generally in any form, is illegal.
This is brilliant. You've brought on a wonderful segue that my brain took as well.
Okay.
How do superpowers in public differ from wands in public if magic exists? A wand legislation, gun legislation, there could be very similar in that or it's a deadly weapon that allows powers that are not innate to you. Like a wizard is not innately a wand carrying thing. It is a thing that gets a wand, uses a wand.
Okay.
A gunman is not a gun carrying thing. It is
a person
who gets a gun, who carries a gun.
Well, I think in that case, your gun allegory there is the perfect one.
To a degree.
Because it's an item that can be used to do things, as opposed to a power that is innate, where rules will start to get a little bit wonky.
To a degree, however, a gun has a singular purpose.
Correct.
Death. A wand is a very multi-purpose tool.
Okay.
It actually is more analogous to knives and swords when it comes to its overall legislative, need to regulate.
Right.
In that, it is something that is a deadly weapon, but it also has a lot of non-deadly uses in a straight up just utility way. Like, I can kill a person with a pitchfork.
Correct.
But that's a farming implement.
Right.
I can kill a person with a butcher's knife. That's a chef's tool.
Well, I think there you wander into, with your word right there, a tool.
Exactly.
What is the item's primary use? As you said, a gun has a singular use, relatively speaking, which is to kill people.
Yeah.
I mean, one can make lots of arguments for security and projecting power.
Well, no, a gun has a singular use, and that is to make a thing not alive,
correct,
regardless of what said thing is.
Right.
The gun's purpose is to unalive it.
Correct.
Whether you're using it for hunting, sure, fine.
Right.
For self-defense, in which case you are unaliving the thing that is attempting to harm you.
Correct.
Or you're a bad actor and you're using it for nefarious purposes.
Right. Well, as I said, the only other use is projection of power.
Yeah.
Which is the threat of unaliving something.
Exactly.
But that's still, that's a semantic argument on the point of usage, really. But it's the killing of something or the threatening of killing of something.
It ties into why firearm legislation is a much more hot-button thing than knife legislation.
Right.
Because knives are, in fact,
tools.
Yes. And a firearm, at the end of the day, whatever your semantics are, at the end of the day, you can't use a firearm for anything other than causing injury.
Correct. That's why when we talk about knives and knife legislation, there are certain kinds of knives that are forbidden. Things like switchblades or other things like that, which have modifications that make them really only useful
for nefarious purposes.
Correct.
Then if we can continue along with the wands, the analogous take on wands, would the legislation not be on the tool itself, but on the spells?
Probably on the spells. If we're using Harry Potter, which we very clearly are here at this point.
Let's just go to the easiest touchstone.
Right. The only thing that I could see analogous to that for if we were going to do wands is, certain wands and wand types might be prohibited from public because they're good at a certain thing, which is a thing that happens in universe.
That's a thing that happened with animal breeds in our universe. Which,
if you look at things like pit bulls,
exactly.
If you look at,
exactly what I was thinking about.
Right. That's a very interesting. Let's not get into that particular topic because there's a lot of interesting political pieces around breed-specific legislation and other things.
It gets real weedy real quick, but just bringing it up can sort of at least put that in your mind, which it has clearly.
Right. But that would be the only thing that you could target there. And in the Harry Potter universe specifically, that probably would be considered a form of discrimination because the wand chooses the wizard, not the other way around, technically how that works.
Which is specific to the Harry Potter universe, at least.
Yeah, but I'm extending my metaphor to the end. Yeah, is at that point that becomes discrimination in Harry Potter if we're going that way, if we are banning specific wand combinations because they're only good for killing people. Which is a weird way to kind of go down that derivation path, but that's really what that turns into, because there's a lot of...
There are certain wands that are pit bulls.
Yeah.
And a sentence that makes sense if you've paid attention to our conversation and makes zero sense to literally anyone else.
Right, and because, again, the wand chooses the wizard rather than the other way around. Well, I guess in the Harry Potter universe, then you just get a cheap backup one that doesn't work very well.
So it's sort of like, and I'm gonna just like dig
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Right.
It's sort of like how you don't pick your gender, you just are a gender.
Yes.
So like the gender picks the person, the wand picks the wizard.
I see what you're doing there. Your metaphor is not really.
It's not very. I told you it's real
good.
bad.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, no.
But if we're going to argue along a line of that's discrimination, there is some vague.
I mean, there's an allegory there that you can make and extend
connection.
that.
Yes.
Right. I mean, at that point, I would extend that to. There is a very famous short story that I know that you have read because it came up during school.
Oh, believe me, if it came up during school, there's no guarantee I read it.
You hurt me. But the story was essentially about if you took equality for all to the nth degree, and you did your best to bring every American, because that's what the story was about.
Yeah.
To being equal in everything. So smart people had like a mechanism to make them less smart, and people that were fit had like weights tied to them and others. And it was a very dumb metaphor. But the story is like written by a famous person. I can't remember the name of it. I'd have to dig it up. But there's a funny thought process there where the actual narrator of the story is watching a ballet, and every now and then, very clearly, like the smart people in that book have like a radio transmitter, and the way to control their smarts is every now and then they just get a blast of white noise.
Oh.
But it's like a globally broadcast thing.
Here's a distraction.
Right. Oh, no. Like, here's a thing that prevents you from thinking.
Yeah, that's what I meant by a distraction.
Yeah, and they're watching a ballet, and like this is like a globally broadcast thing. And every time like the white noise goes, half of the ballet dancers fall over.
Huh.
And then the narrator goes, these people are good at what they do. Do they really need a thing?
Wow, this show would be good if we let it.
Right. But, to that point of discriminating for what you're good at, which is where the Harry Potter metaphor goes there,
Well, I wouldn't even necessarily say it's quote unquote what you're good at. It's
what the wand's good at.
It's what the wand has a proclivity for.
Correct. But,
which again is getting into the semantics of it all.
Right. But to pull your question back, because we've wandered off, you clearly wanted to bring up that wand example there. So let's wander back to your original question here of
legislation as applies.
And superheroes.
Well, I want to bring it up because, I mean, at the end of the day, what is most media's take on magic except another form of superpower?
Which is true. I mean, and I think the question I would have there is, all right, in our theoretical universe, if we're talking about legislation, we have to think about haves and have-nots. Does everyone have superpowers? Do some people have superpowers? Do few people have superpowers? And how that will then turn into how big of a threat is this to other people? For your particular magic example here, let's assume magic is superpowers in this case. If we go back to Harry Potter again, only some people have magic, which, are all of the wizards. And therefore, when we think about legislation, where lawmakers are going to go is how much of a threat are these folks to other folks, and that's probably where innate superpowers would go. There would probably need to be things like a classification system, which everyone would absolutely hate because it would be, by its nature, extremely discriminatory.
Yes.
But, if your superpower is every 3 or 4 days you explode.
If your superpower is you just have radiation.
Right. Then, there's whether or not that you are a good person or not, you're a danger to society.
Well, if I may,
okay.
At least specifically for the radiation example that I gave, or, very similar types of superpowers, because if we're going an X-Men route,
right,
they are powers. They are not always necessarily useful or beneficial.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But if we go along the routes of like something along the lines of a person who just has radiation or anything,
right,
there's like a harmfulness to their being.
Right.
I mean, that's just essentially an extremely infectious individual. Hey, you have limited contact to people because you're a danger to them.
Or you could think about it as a disability.
Or that, yeah. That's a good way to think of it too.
Right. Honestly, I think that's a healthier way to think about it.
That's a much healthier way of thinking about it.
Because at that point is, part of that point of a classification system there would be to determine what folks have.
Are you significantly powered, most significantly powered?
Right.
If we're going to use the disability example, are you significantly disabled, most significantly disabled, where we have a classification for that kind of thing already in place.
Correct. And then things like, again, to note that if we're talking about superpowers not always being beneficial, are you likely to be a harm to others, to yourself, to both?
Which again is continuing our disability connection here.
Correct. Yeah, because these are, and that's, to me,
that's probably the most charitable and empathic way to look at the situation.
Correct. I mean, that's
which is the one that I would like to imagine we would be able to go down. By which I mean, that's the leftist platform.
Right. Well, and even with that thought process, like that's still inherently discriminatory, which classification is inherently discriminatory.
Yes.
But from if we're thinking about again as an evolving set of legislation, let's again use the My Hero Academia example, because honestly, this is really a good example show of that is,
because they do have a classification system that's, to my understanding, rather robust.
Right. Well, and also like in universe, like the path in the plot of that universe is, hi, people with power started to show up every day, and it has, due to natural growth rates, has slowly expanded, and society has had to figure out shit since then. And it.
So what you're saying is a perfect example, and I
for your question,
don't much watch anime anymore.
That's correct.
Or read manga.
I mean, also it doesn't really discuss those early years all that much, but
that's the part that I would find the most intriguing.
Right.
That's like a lot of my problems with a lot of different shows is like, wow, this premise is really cool. You went in a direction that I didn't want you to.
Right.
Like, hey, here's that cool My Hero Academia premise. I want to see how they dealt with that. And instead they're like, for 75 years later, here's a story about this guy getting powered up.
Right. Well,
or
they do discuss it. They're in that universe, there is very clearly a period where as people with powers increased in number, chaos descended. Like literally chaos descended between normals and people that had powers.
First of all, normals?
Is
that what they call them in the show, or are you just being discriminatory?
I believe in the show they called them the quirkless.
Well, if that is the society, if that is the term that society has agreed is acceptable,
right,
including quote unquote the quirkless, they have to be involved in that choice and conversation.
I mean, I'm not sure if they do. They are.
Well, yeah, but
it's because at that point. Because we're at the in universe, they're at the 90% people do have quirks at that point.
Yeah,
but there's a period where essentially the government fell apart, and it took another generation for them to.
I want the story of them putting it back together.
It involved a lot of crime.
I want the story of them putting it back together. I don't want it to be like, oh, and here's a history lesson. I want it to be a story.
Well, I think, and I've not read the parts of the manga in super detail where they go into this, but eventually what ended up happening was, a couple of very powerful folks with powers kind of came into being, started to shape the world kind of back to the way it was, and sort of ontologically things began to take shape around that. Because once,
I mean. That's cool and all, but that's That's real Nietzschean Ubermensch type bullcrap.
It's superpowers, man. Like that's
I know,
that's how the universe works.
Incorrect. That is not superpowers. That is superheroes.
I mean, fair enough.
Superheroes are Ubermensch.
Yes.
Superpowers are just like X-Men, where sometimes it just sucks.
I mean, yes. And it again, in My Hero Academia, sometimes that also just sucks.
But then you also sometimes just get Nietzsche and Ubermensch who take over the world and just happen to do everything right because, of course, might makes right.
Yeah.
Because it's fiction and...
Yeah, because that's how fiction works sometimes.
And sometimes you end up with the genetics wars of 2463. I don't remember what the Star Trek thing is, but Khan.
But I think...
Poop, allegory for Ubermensch.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
But skipping forward a little bit on the My Hero Academia topic, they do actually come up with, or there are some concepts in there that I think are kind of interesting overall. To bring back to your initial question on legislation, again, they've reached a point of like 90% superpowers, and because we hit that point, of course, we now have arbitrary distinctions between people again, and have to again worry about racism. Because
it's just fantastical racism.
It's fantastical racism.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fantastical racism by which really it's just a caste system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in My Hero Academia, it's split between those that have powers and look reasonably human, and those that have powers and don't look reasonably human, based on what their particular superpower did to them.
Whether or not said quirk is useful either as a utility like tool or as a weapon in combat.
Right.
It's based off of, do you look like a person?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so it's fantastical racism.
Yep, 100%.
They didn't go the interesting route with it.
Nope, did not. But to me, that's a very human way to go, as opposed to the interesting way to go.
I mean, the human way is the easy way.
I mean, it's the way we're...
Wired.
Yep, wired pretty much. Human looking good, non-human looking bad.
Cat good.
Yeah, I mean, as long as cat's not on me.
Cat good.
But
Dog good.
dog also good.
Dog not human looking.
No. But I am actually in the middle of a book that's discussing that topic, interestingly enough.
Do horses look like horses? Or
No.
do they look like dogs?
I mean, horses do look like dogs. Honestly, the answer is everything that's domesticated eventually starts looking kind of the same, which is the result of a number of very interesting studies.
Actually, yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, there's a very interesting case involving gray foxes from Siberia. Or silver foxes, I'm sorry.
There is one, breed,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, of fox that we're, really close to domesticating.
Yeah, it's the silver fox.
It is the silver, okay,
Yeah.
that is the same one.
And the scientist behind it is a Soviet scientist.
Yeah, because...
who just was like, how do we domesticate a thing? And
Can be cat dog?
Yeah.
The answer is,
if you,
technically, if you do it long enough,
Right.
anything could be a cat dog.
Right. And what he did was he took a population of foxes, and then he essentially bred any of the ones that were less fearful to humans, just based on general reactions and ability, and then just did that for 40 years.
Yep.
He bred foxes. And
Yep.
at this point, I think the population is 80% domesticated. And what he noticed is that the domestication of these creatures turned them kind of dog-like.
It softened a lot of their
Mm-hmm.
features because they were now being selected for, human attractive features.
No, they weren't, which was the interesting case. That is the correct answer on what they did. But for the sake of this experiment, it had nothing to do with what they looked. But they did get those features.
But that's what you
Right.
actually slightly misunderstood what I meant. In selecting for traits that were good to humans, it also led towards dog.
Correct.
Because we did that already.
Right. And I think the greater genetic response was a lot of those things are connected to the process of domestication, even if we did not realize it. There are because obviously genetically it's very complicated. It's extremely complicated.
Yeah, I mean, you start dealing with a lot of, I mean, we were getting into nature versus nurture type conversations.
I mean, we're well off topic, actually.
No, but I mean, but for this particular, like, who cares? It's a conversation. We're having fun. That's the whole point.
Right.
When it comes to, like, breeding a domestic stock, you are selecting animals who are less fearful. Is that bred into them, or is that learned behavior? So what are you actually selecting when you're doing that breeding?
So I think for the most part, a lot of it has to do with selecting for cortisol production.
That checks out.
Because if
you
have...
that is a fear/anxiety response.
Right.
That is like fully controllable.
Correct. Yeah. If the animal natively has like a lower threshold or higher threshold for stress, I think might be, and is less likely to be afraid of a human being, then you concentrate on that, and breed that in there and it also could be a level of intelligence, and not necessarily a high level of intelligence, in all honesty, or low.
I mean,
right. But
so there are dogs, we domesticated them, and there are some dogs that are real stupid.
Yeah.
So clearly, you don't need a high level of intelligence to be domesticated.
Right. But, I mean, the flip side of that is dogs are very good at certain things.
Oh, yeah.
And because I just got through the section of the book that was discussing.
Yeah, of course.
Like, they noted that wolves were in fact better at certain tasks. Like, they did a rope pulling experiment where they trained a group of wolves to pull ropes in like a certain amount of or certain order and given certain commands. And the wolves were much better at that than dogs, with the background thought really of being grabbing and pulling ropes or grabbing and pulling things is way more relevant still to wolves
because they need to do it to hunt
as opposed to dogs who pulling something is just something fun that they do. It's not
it is play as opposed to work, which would be more carrying something.
Right. And dogs in particular are very good at engaging and watching human behavior, which is not a thing native. Like,
no.
I think the point is dogs will look you in the eyes, which is not a natural behavior, and that is a both burned.
Go ahead.
It's both a bred and learned behavior. Wow. I combined those words in a weird way.
Yeah.
But, it's a thing that they've developed genetically as a species to be able to do, because being able to look and judge human beings' faces is a survival mechanic.
Because that's how a lot of human communication is done, through the face.
Correct. But wolves can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's not a problem they need to solve. Wolves do have faces, obviously, but they do whole body communication.
Turns out wolves are not very great at reading human faces. Cool. That book was useless.
Hey, I'm enjoying it.
No, I'm messing.
Right. But yeah, it's to that thought overall. How did we get on this topic?
I don't know.
This
is just how our conversations work.
Yeah, I'm trying to trace that
walk
back.
it back. Wolves,
dogs,
silver foxes, domestication.
Genetic selection at some point has to be involved.
I'm lost on how we got there, frankly.
Because before that, we had jumped from racism.
My Hero Academia, things that look like humans or not.
Yeah, that has to be where
which I think somehow led to domestication because it dealt with the way things look.
Correct. And because I'm reading this book. So fair enough.
Yeah, right. Because you were reading the book, it was in your head.
Right. But yeah, I think, again, jumping back on topic. So I think, superpowers, if we talk about care of people, the classification system, I think, becomes really important. I think, again, that there's... Obviously, if we are projecting forward in a historical pattern, there's going to be a classification system can change in a lot of different ways. It can go from being beneficial to being detrimental. Again, very similar to our current disability systems and its history of.
And although it obviously, as we can see, might take a while,
right?
The classification, that there system there,
yeah,
can change over time.
Correct. And should change over time.
And absolutely should. But I mean, like, it's legislation. It evolves.
Right. It also moves at the speed of politics, which is either nothing or,
it's slower than the speed of society.
Correct.
Because the changes have to happen societally first before they can trickle down into the politics.
Right. And again, if we think that, but that arrives at a pretty late state version, already, this classification system. I think, if we dive back and say that we're in year 1 of superpowers arriving, because I think classification's probably year 50 of superpowers arriving from a legislation perspective.
If that early, who knows? And it depends, among other things, less on the time and more on the rate.
Yes. The rate and general humans not being shitheads, which is unpredictable because you never know what happens.
Either way, the rate of occurrence is probably the primary factor in the urgency of the legislation.
Correct. I mean, if we reach 50%, if we reach the 25 to 50% threshold, at that point, clearly things are not going away.
Yeah. I mean, if you start looking at it from, this is a weird form of semi-allegory, but if you look at it in like a diaspora type of way, like, what is the percentage of your population that is this minority?
Correct. Yes.
That can grow or shrink depending on, a number of factors, obviously.
Correct.
So then, we're looking at demographical makeups.
Right. And even genetically speaking, that's highly variable. If we're going to talk about, this is a single genome that is slowly spreading through the United States, it's probably operating in some form of small exponential factor, 1 to 2 to 5, versus, nope, humanity has just reached this threshold level, and 1 year we had none, and the next year we had 50,
Now 20% of us are just born this way somehow.
Right.
Yeah, from a genetic standpoint, it would work differently than an ontological standpoint.
Right. What I would expect is
going back to your original question, which does sort of change things, we could even split it in half if we really wanted to dig into the ramifications of the two different base presumptions of mutation, evolution versus ontological, quote unquote, accidents are happening at an increased rate type of thing. The nuclear age take on
superheroes, yeah. All of a sudden, humanity has changed in a subtle way, causing
because there's definitely
mutations.
There's definitely going to be an overall society, the way people react to it is going to be different if it's, hey, I was born this way. Hey, look, now we're getting our every allegory that X-Men has ever touched again.
Yes.
Versus, well, this just happened and I was a fully grown adult, but now I'm like this.
Right.
That's
different. Yeah.
There's a very, very different moral, ethical, and societal, empathical, people are just going to be more weird about freaking Dr. Manhattan showing up.
I don't know about that. Because my note will be, and I'm going to make some gross judgments here. If me as an adult got superpowers, you as an adult can present that far better to people around you, assuming that you're not, our superpower guy who's exploding every 2 days, and accidentally and indiscriminately killing people. But you can come across and present that, and, if that was all happening, versus kids can't do that. That's kidding. And, one would ideally hope that, children evolving as the...
We also sort of now really kind of drill down into a lot of the details of our supposed thought experiment, because are we doing these types of powers are manifesting immediately? Are they manifesting a certain age? Are they manifesting at a trigger in general?
Right. Well, that's I mean, to me, to some degree, that impacts your question.
Exactly. That's what I'm sort of like saying. Like,
because
where do we want to go with this situation?
Right.
Which now, unfortunately for me, sort of strips away a little bit of the what if just happen legislation, and now gets into the okay, well, what type of story do we want to tell? What kind of allegory are we going for? Because that's what that slowly becomes.
That turns. Yeah, I mean, because we could go down all of the paths, and talk about them, and they're all probably relevant, but they're all going to have very different. Because again, the easiest one is again the X-Men path of hey, kids just start developing these abilities some days, and it's specifically children.
I mean, X-Men kind of generally has had the thrust at, and it's caused by puberty.
Correct. Yeah, which
makes sense from a hey, your body is changing.
Right.
You may start growing hair or exploding.
Right. Exploding and killing everyone within a 2-mile distance. Sometimes both. And that one's real bad.
Your body's gonna start feeling weird. And it might do some weird things.
Right.
But like spikes.
Yeah, like spikes. But my note from like a public perception, like X-Men, I think, gets things right in a lot of ways because, for a developing population like that, in my particular opinion, it's going to be very much us versus them, and...
I mean, that's the unfortunate, like, base level of human tribalism.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, we're going to have parents that are very protective of their children. There's going to have parents that are like, oh my God, what have I bred?
I mean, again, if we're doing X-Men stuff, X-Men is very highly tied to the LGBTQ allegory.
Oh yeah, actually, but it fits. I mean, I assuming even outside the allegory, I would assume that would be how that worked because human beings are only so predictable.
Well, human beings are only so predictable. Is sort of skirting the issue, which is to say, there's a lot of humans and all of them will react differently.
Correct.
And some of them react differently in a way that is similar to each other.
Correct.
But like that's the end all be all is if we're going to try and approach this semi-realistically, we have to kind of wrestle with the fact that like if you can think of a response, someone's going to have it.
Right. And my note there would be again, to tie this back to your government question.
Specifically, if we're looking at American representational democracy.
So we would probably see 2 major responses governmentally from an initial sort of population explosion kind of thing. One which would be probably protection, which would be the mostly positive version for that. Let's protect these developing folks from discrimination and other forms. And then we're going to have the restriction, which will be the other part of that is let's protect everyone else from these people. And, and it's likely many pieces of legislation would have both of those components, I would guess, because why would you not?
And the order in which they happen will really depend on what type of things first show up.
Correct. That's going to be as highly situational. If again, mutant superpower number 1 is exploding men,
it's going to be protect the It's going to be
restricted. Yeah, and it's
if mutant person number 1 is fish scales,
heals the sick. All right,
sweet.
Yeah,
more of that, please.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, because it will be very one-off-ish for those initial periods.
Oh man, I just realized something as well.
What?
We're gonna deal with a lot of cults.
Yep.
A lot of cults.
I mean, especially in that initial period when everyone's going, what the fuck is going on?
Yep.
Yeah. Definitely the second coming. Yep. As always, is our first option.
Yeah. The end is nigh.
Right. The end is nigh. Clearly, this guy who explodes is a allegory for God's wrath upon us all.
And
we should worship him.
I saw a
exploding man
rider, and his horse exploded.
But no, that would be a perfectly normal human reaction. In all honesty, is
Oh, we get doomsday cults for the slightest of things.
oh yeah, for actual real
For
superpowers,
an actual doomsday?
yeah.
That would be a good reason to have a doomsday
They
cult,
call-
I
yep,
guess.
Yep. Hey, this person looks like an angel. Might be an angel.
Might be an angel.
Better hedge my bets.
Eh.
Get my worship on. But yeah, no. And that word again, ideally we'd hit legislation on protection and management of that, and hopefully, assuming that we have our standard growth patterns and everything, that eventually people would realize that this is a thing. And if we don't have growth patterns, maybe it's just 2% of the population has superpowers
Forever.
Yeah. Don't know how that would happen, but we're
in a weird hypothetical.
right.
Let's just roll with the thought experiment.
Right. Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, a lot of the how is less important than the reaction to it.
Right. Well, I mean, we could to keep this real. It's maybe superpowers is a disease, or like cancer, or a rare genetic defect.
I mean, cancer's an interesting one to look at in the line of like literally every human is susceptible to this, regardless of any other factor.
Right.
You could just get cancer.
Yeah. Maybe superpowers is like that.
You can just get superpowers.
Yep.
And then they super chemo your powers out.
I mean, someone would try that. X-Men.
Hey, X-Men's done that. Wow, wait, hold on a minute.
But my note is, if we take it to that level, and hey, it's just a low genetic preponderance of you need 16 things to happen, for this to happen. That's also technically genetically possible. That's reasonable.
If we kind of like the cancer thought, because that's an interesting one to go down, because like we can definitely point at markers and predispositions to developing cancer.
Oh yeah, maybe superpowers.
Yeah.
Why not? Like if it's genetic cause, which again is a thing that we can have for this thought experiment, that you can have genetic markers for it. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's
if your two options are cancer or superpowers.
Just hope that your cancer doesn't have superpowers.
Oh no. That's terrifying.
Well, you said that earlier. It was like, oh, there's a chance to get cancer. And my immediate thought was, but you can get cancer in a lot of different ways. So does this mean you can get superpowers in a lot of different ways? Like, which you technically can. That is technically how that works.
Yeah. I mean, if there are factors that can lead to X. Right. Hey, if you don't want to develop superpowers, avoid Y.
I mean, if we're going to take that to strange and weird ways, my superpower is that my kidneys shoot lasers.
I mean,
I die.
Yes, obviously, but like, cancer kills you.
Yeah, like,
as we said, not all of the powers may necessarily be beneficial.
Right.
Which I think actually makes it a much more interesting thought drive if we go that way, because then if we're going to roll with the cancer thing, we might as well roll with the cancer thing.
Right.
On one hand, cancer itself, nobody wants that.
Correct.
Because it has zero benefits.
Correct.
Superpowers could be it's a lottery.
So
you could get a cool superpower, or your kidneys could shoot lasers and you die.
Right. Or you could think about it like sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia.
There's a good one.
Is generally bad, but if you are a carrier for sickle cell anemia and not a full-on, it's not both.
It's not.
You're not primary for the gene for both.
Yeah.
If you only have one gene, you have a strong ability to resist malaria.
Because
that's
how it works.
Because
biology is crazy, and I didn't take OChem.
Right. Has something to do with the cells not being the right shape, I think, because that's what sickle cell anemia does, is change the shape.
Change the shape of the cell, yeah.
Right. And make you a carrier. But
it is technically a genetic change that is overall not great, but could be good.
Right. but maybe superpowers work that way.
Superpowers or something along that line.
And in that case, now superpowers we're concerned about from a medical perspective.
Exactly, and that becomes very interesting.
Right, because then we're going full disability. Our thing here is just like, all right, you developed this.
Well, it's a very interesting full disability because now we're going on our like full run is from like beneficial powers to not beneficial powers to dead.
Yeah, to my mutation came out. I died.
I mean, we're just going back to laser kidneys.
Yeah, I mean,
which at that point, like, yeah, it is a medical type thing because it's either certain types of people. There'd be a religion built around it, obviously, of you know, activate your superpower gene thing if you have it. If we're going along these, like, not everybody has sickle cell anemia type of thing.
But you have a 1% chance of everything being beneficial. And doesn't pretty much lead to your direct death.
And we don't even need to necessarily pin down the exact percent, because I think that doesn't matter. I think regardless of what the percent is, there's going to be people that are going to... I mean, people play the lottery in real life.
Right.
To be fair, the lottery does not kill you when you lose. Directly.
We could think of like the organ lotteries that we know of and have stories of from like the Chinese populations overall, where you have a chance to win $5 million, but if you lose an eye, or something, which we do know exist, are probably not as common as people have made them out to be.
Yeah,
but that's the thing that happens.
But that is an example to point at real world human behaviors as a touch point of like, well, people have done this thing. So in our hypothetical, people probably would do this thing.
Right.
Would it be a lot of people? Probably not.
Right.
Especially after the first 99% of them just died from it.
Depends on what that 1.5% got out of it.
Well, yeah, and again, like, technically, then you get into the boring, quote-unquote, boring part of it, where you start going... It's much more interesting to leave a lot of the percentages as us not nailing them down, because it's much more interesting to look at the general reaction to these things instead of crafting a fully complete narrative scenario.
Well, I mean, my point to that particular, if at the 0.5% you come out as a god, or otherwise as a god, that still might incentivize the 99.5% of the people to do that.
Right, but my point is getting down into those specifics and coming out with the at that point you're just saying, hey, at what percentage success rate would you risk maybe getting a superpower, which is a completely different hypothetical.
No, I mean, my answer, I don't care what the percentage is. It's low enough. Like, the answer there, if in our particular scenario that we were discussing, is it seems like it was low enough that it didn't really matter.
If it's not 100%,
right?
I don't want laser kidneys.
Maybe it has a benefit. You're immune to cancer. It auto-targets your cancer. Kills the rest of you, but it definitely hates cancer.
Baby in the bathwater, my dude.
Sickle cell anemia.
Well, yeah. But the legislation...
By the way, sickle cell anemia is not funny. It is just funny for the example of this.
No. When you... Correct. Sickle cell anemia itself.
Not funny.
Not funny in the slightest. But in this one particular weird hypothetical.
Correct.
Yeah. As far as the whole legislation-y type of... I think when we touched upon treating it as a medical issue, now that's an interesting thing to run down, because then we start looking at we start introducing such phrases, how to manage your superpowers.
I mean, honestly, I was going to say we wouldn't phrase it that way, and then I thought about it for 2 seconds.
We absolutely would.
There would definitely be a children's pamphlet of how to manage your superpowers.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't be for an adult, but that would be a set of children's literature that would probably be written up to be like, hi, your powers to, I don't know, shoot your fingernails across the room, but not regrow them, can be managed this way. Because if we're doing medical things for weird mutations that probably are not beneficial to you.
We've already got here by looking at we're going to have a categorization system.
Right.
So it's going to be like, all right, we're going to have like a battery of tests to help determine what someone's someone is capable of.
Right.
And then categorizing, because, humans absolutely love taxonomy.
Right.
We're going to now start, this is a skin-based projectile power. You can manage these types of power this way.
Right.
Now, your specifics may differ depending on your exact case.
Right.
However, and then we're going to start getting peer support groups based around what your types of different powers are.
Right. Which, again, wouldn't be that much different than the normal
exactly
today. Which would be good. That would be, again, a healthy way to handle that in the grand scheme of things. Assuming, again, that that we've moved past any of the initial stages, in which case the initial stages are wild experimentation to figure out what the hell's going on. But
ideally, right. A lot of it, like I'm specifically thinking of how American population would react to this, by which I mean, does it change things if it is isolated to the American population or worldwide?
If we're talking legalities, yes, I think.
Kind of, but regardless of how the rest of the world is doing things, America is going to do things the way we think we should.
Yeah, because America, fuck yeah.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, whether it's worldwide or not, America's still probably going to do
whatever it feels like.
Pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Because America.
Yeah. For better or for worse.
America.
For anyone listening. Yeah. We neither support nor
whichever
deny.
way. That's the whole point of it being a democracy, is we do the things the way in which
we do the
will of the people says to do the things.
Right. Well,
to an extent.
Right. The world population
ideally, I guess.
Right. The world population has a lot of other things probably happening during these periods. I will assume, many of the Western countries will have similar thought processes.
But I think for the scope of our thought experiment, we should limit to American reaction.
That's the one that we know best.
I
can only bluntly predict at what Russian would do. Give them all vodka. They would be absolutely 100% gulagging the majority of them. Probably. But then they would still get some vodka.
To the gulag.
Yeah. You're under the assumption there's not just immediate experimentation.
No, the gulag is an experimentation camp in this particular
scenario. Yeah, but
and if you're useful, you get used. But if you're too useful, they're scared of you and get rid of you.
Yes, X-Men has done this before.
That's a euphemism for murder.
Yeah, and X-Men has done this before.
Well, yeah, because X-Men is really good at this type of thing. Right. Generally, some of it's silly.
Right. Well, yes. In fact, a lot of it's silly.
Oh, yeah, the majority of it's silly. But it's
for
silly
every hard-hitting and
accurate way.
Yeah, for every great and amazing metaphor that it puts together, there's probably 15 plot lines that are mutants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight up.
But limiting to the American view on how we would, like that initial period of quote-unquote experimentation... Mm-hmm. It's going to look like allergy tests, right? Not directly, but it's going to have a very similar type of, all right, we're throwing crap at the wall. We're throwing science at the wall and seeing what sticks.
The thing with allergy tests, the answer is I don't know. Because allergy tests are very specific. Because allergies they're testing a reaction to your body against a foreign body.
But I mean that in the vein of like, the allergy test strip is like, okay, here's 15 different allergens. Let's see which part of your skin goes poof.
Yes. It's very painful. Have you done it?
I have not done it because I don't really have any allergies, so they never felt the need.
I have done it 2 or 3 times, and it
sounds miserable.
Utterly miserable.
Oh yeah, it sounds terrible. Even if no allergy reactions occur, it sounds awful.
Yeah, because it is literally them taking a needle or 50 different needles on your back in a grid and poking you with them.
Yep.
And seeing which ones react.
Yep.
And it is like being on fire. Like it is. Because
I've gotten tattoos.
Right.
Not exactly the same, but it is being punctured repeatedly with needles.
Oh yeah. No. Well, it's punctured repeatedly by needles, and then every now and then one of them just
hurts a lot.
Hurts forever.
Yeah.
Would not recommend. Do not
do not get an allergy test unless you suspect that you have allergies that are impacting you in such a way that they need to be managed.
Right.
Right. No, but what I mean by they would be like allergy tests is like it would have to be some sort of wide-ranging battery.
Yes. Well, I think the thing there would be in this situation, can we tell that you have a mutation through a blood test? That would be, or a mutation or superpower by blood. Is it just an initial genetic marker for, yep, you will not?
It depends on exactly what our scenario goes with here.
Correct, yeah.
I think that we could simplify things by saying that we go along the certain markers indicate that it is more likely.
Right.
But regardless, it is still possible.
Right. Yeah. And that's how blood markers work, honestly, anyway.
Yeah. So, like...
But yeah, your initial test then would determine, all right...
The test would not...
Right.
That type of test is not going to say, yes, you have superpower. It's going to say, well, you're pretty likely to have superpower.
Right.
Which means we'll look at it from an allergy test perspective.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Do you feel like you have allergies? You should probably get tested for them.
Right.
Do you not feel like you have allergies?
Do you feel like you have superpowers today?
Well, are you exhibiting? Do you have any familial history of superpower?
Do you have a familiar history of exploding randomly, killing everyone within a 2-mile radius?
Yes, but thankfully it was after my great grandfather was born. What gets real weird is that my dad was born before he was conceived, but his powers were wild.
Let's avoid that. Yeah. No time travel.
Yeah. But going back to the allergies thing, like, if you have the markers that say, hey, you're likely for superpowers, then we're probably going to want to test you for superpowers.
Right.
Again, we're looking at it from a medical perspective. Hey, you're likely to have blah. We're going to test you for blah.
Right.
Hey, you're unlikely to have blah. We could still test you, but you don't really need to.
I mean, the thing here, I think, is if you ran tests on this person, and it came, hey, it's likely. In our situation here of, hey, you get a random superpower or you have something, they probably would just monitor, because at that point it will be, maybe you would have like a set of tests, for like standard, but like what would be a standard grouping of those would be probably the question. Because it might just be all right, you're going to be on observation and, report for a month how you feel on these 15 things.
Yeah.
And, maybe you're eventually going to work it out because...
You'd be doing a lot of, like, what's the word? Over a long period of time. Observation over a long period of time. There's a word there, and I've lost it entirely.
I would just call them observations.
Sure, go with that. Yeah. It'll pop 15 minutes from now. I'm going to shout a word at you.
All right, that's fair. We have a radio. We have a microphone in front of us.
Yep.
We could have a radio in front of us, but
put on some radio right now.
No, I think we're good. But yeah, to my point there would be I think there'd probably be a lot of observation, because at that point it'd be all right. I don't know if you're going to shoot lasers out of your eyes or your toenails are going to grow extra fast. Or maybe your kidneys are going to shoot lasers. We're going to be watching out for any sign of this, and you just report this.
Baselining.
Okay.
You'd be doing a lot of like, okay, how did you feel over the course of this week compared to over this week?
Right.
Where's our baseline? Are things changing?
Right.
Yeah, that was the concept I was trying to get at.
Right.
Baselining.
And that, I mean, for that case, probably what would happen is you'd have an initial baseline period, and then probably like testing every 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, something.
That,
well, it also depends on, and we have not set this up in our hypothetical scenario,
right.
the rate at which the powers manifest versus, well, not versus, but also including, like, when in life are they likely to manifest?
Correct. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, for like a lot of our suppositions have, like, if we're going with our medical thing, could be at any time.
Yeah.
Hey, mutation finally hit.
Which again,
developed. Yeah.
If we're looking at, I mean, the
problem is X-Men is too easy to immediately go back to and make everything happen at puberty.
Yeah, but that does not quite match the twist on it that we're doing with our medical, because it's not necessarily like straight genetics the way X-Men does it.
It's a development thing. Yeah. You reach a point where your body does the thing.
Some weird switch flicks.
Right.
Again,
cancer analog.
Yeah, the cancer analog is a strong like genesis of the idea. Right. When it comes to the whole observation of it all, I think that there is a consideration to be had regarding what are we seeing from like the least externally impactful mutations to the most externally impactful.
Externally meaning
how likely are people to explode in a 2-mile radius to bring up
that
your
kind
previous,
of external.
Yeah. As opposed to my kidneys burst out lasers, but only inside of my body.
Thankfully, my skin has developed an internal shield
that magnetically shielded.
Unfortunately, blocks inside, so the lasers just bounce around inside. I haven't died yet. They're very small lasers.
My superpower is that actually I'm just a laser inside. It's awful. I have heartburn all the time.
All the time. And by heartburn, I mean...
My heart is burning.
Yeah.
Yeah. My heart is also a laser because all of me inside is laser. I cannot get a tattoo.
Oh man,
it would be so much laser. You know how you bleed? I bleed laser. And it's not even... Here's the thing. It's not cool Cyclops laser. It's like real laser. Like I can make it bright in here. And also, that is my life energy that is draining out when that happens.
Right.
All right, well, that was a fun little tangent. Back to our thing.
Well, I have invented several terrible superheroes.
Oh, yeah, no, it's been great. This has been a wonderful little bit of inspiration for later.
Explosion Man.
I'm particularly fond of normal human but laser inside dude. Who doesn't even have cool destructive laser power.
No. It just kills him. I mean... Sorry.
Where were we?
Yeah, back on topic.
Laser. Oh. The level at which, like, are we seeing specific markers that are saying, hey, you're likely to explode, my dude, versus markers that are saying, you got, I don't know, penguin feet?
Fair enough. Probably depends. I mean...
Because whether or not we're seeing those types of indicators, and again, I like the idea of looking at them as indicators and not like, yep, that's what's happening.
Right. I mean, it really depends on how much of our changes are like really, and I'm going to air quotes here.
Yeah.
How much of these changes are biological? Like if you getting penguin feet, like as the result of the genes that are in your feet transforming into that,
Well, if we're looking at it
medically, the answer would be yes.
If we're looking at it from a more grounded perspective, you wouldn't just wake up and have penguin feet. Eventually, you would shed enough human feet skin cells that you would have penguin feet.
No, it would just be cancer. It would just be cancer.
I mean, yeah, but it would be cancer that results in penguin feet, not cancer that results in weird, squamous, human cells that aren't human cells.
Right. Well, I mean, my note would be for a dose of realism here before we do it. If your genes suddenly change, it would just be cancer.
We're saying, what if cancer, but instead of cancer, mutation. Random superpower?
Right.
That's essentially what we're saying.
Right.
Except also cancer still exists in this world.
And it also can have superpowers.
No, I don't. I get that we said that earlier. It's the superpower is that it can kill anything it grows inside.
Yep. But no, yeah.
It's the entropic man.
Is he just cancer?
I mean, in some interpretations, and yes.
But yeah, if in that case, yeah, there would be, I would assume, a transition process. Don't know how that would work. Because I don't.
Well, I think it also technically would depend on the type of power that is activating. Sort of similar to like.
Well, I think no. The answer would be is in all cases it would have to be, because in that they're all genetic changes causing like complete body changes at that point.
Well, I'm gonna unfortunately have to bear a little bit of my ignorance here when it comes to a lot of genetic disorder type stuff.
Well, I mean, there's no genetic disorder that turns your feet into penguin feet.
Well, yeah, I get that, obviously. Yes, I am not. That one I was aware of.
Good to know. Good to know.
But when it comes to real world genetic disorders, like some, and I'm asking a question here. I am bearing my ignorance.
Right.
There are some genetic disorders that are just like immediate upon birth. Are there also some genetic disorders that are like, and then this will manifest later in life?
Yes. I mean, but my note would be in those cases from a genetics perspective, your genetics would not change. It's just that the manifestation would happen later.
Yeah.
And normally that would actually be probably around puberty, because at that point...
Because that's usually the type of chemical trigger for that kind of thing.
Right.
So if we continue along this thought line of wanting to connect things back to things that already exist in reality.
Right.
What is the I mean, obviously we just discussed it. The mechanism is puberty turns the chemicals on that causes some biological change.
Right.
Which is that every single of these disorders works that way, or like.
I mean, if you're going to ask if every single disorder, I don't know.
Well, I guess now that I think of it, I'm now sort of like extending and thinking of like end of life disorders, which Alzheimer's, dementia, which do have
a large genetic
components to them,
and
manifest near typically later in life.
Correct.
You can have early onset, of course, but you can have early onset anything technically.
Right. I mean, in those cases, when and if they are largely environmentally driven, the genetic component is huge. It's the possibility of you getting the thing, but the environmental component, and the environment is a wide.
Yeah, I mean it's running.
Your entire life.
The environment is your life,
right,
and every single choice that you made in it,
right.
So that's a lot.
Man, I shouldn't have worked in that cancer plant. It gave me cancer.
Was it a plant that was...
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
My lifestyle choices were poor.
Clearly.
Right. Yeah. But no.
So you were painting glow-in-the-dark dials on wristwatches.
Delicious, delicious radium.
Yep. Anyway, let's not dwell on that sad bit of history. And instead talk about superpowers.
Like cancer. Got it.
Superpowers that are cancer.
Yeah. But, I mean, my note then is, if we think about it as cancer, like let's ignore like this being a genetic disease. I mean, even if cancer is genetic disease.
But if cancer is a genetic disease, but it's a genetic disease that can literally happen to anyone.
Correct.
Regardless of genetics.
Right.
Because of, as we previously just now talked about, environment.
Correct.
So there is something in the human body that can result in cancer. And by the human body, I mean like literally every human alive can get cancer.
Yes. If you eat enough aspartame, it will give you cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to eat an
it's so
amount
much
of our aspartame.
But again, I mean,
Right.
if you consume or in one way or another, introduce into your body enough of anything,
Yep.
it will either kill you or give you cancer.
Yeah, pretty much. Because your body's like, what the fuck? What?
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Which, side note, that's why I continually go back to my tried and true, all things in moderation. For some things, moderation is none.
Yes.
Or the classic Terry Pratchett, all mushrooms are edible.
Once.
Some mushrooms are edible once.
But, to pull our let's just say the superpower is the result of just cancer. Like, not like is, but can just happen.
Sometimes cancer, instead of instead of forming into ball of cancer, forms into these cells changed to superpower now.
Right. You now have penguin feet gene.
Yeah.
Sure. Like,
which is better than guy who has laser kidney.
Yeah, laser kidney. Man, he wishes he had the penguin feet.
He wishes he had a lot. I mean, list most other powers.
Yeah. But let's say that. Like, and it's completely spontaneous development. Like... no, like... That would be our cancer analog here. Is it's completely spontaneous development of superpowers, which means it could happen at any point, to anyone at any time.
There's a spontaneous development of cancer,
right?
But then, if we're going with the cancer analog, like there's a level at which cancer is detected in which it is manageable,
correct?
Versus like late stage stuff,
correct?
And when it comes to superpowers, like cancer,
we're sticking too much on the cancer analog.
Yeah, I'm like cancer grows, right? Superpower grow.
Yeah, look, I mean that. All of a sudden, the heart starts shooting lasers.
Yeah, I mean, right. Suddenly the lasers stop being illumination and start actually burning.
Right.
And by suddenly, I mean like we are looking at changes that are happening on a biological time frame, not on like
a galactic time frame.
Well, I mean, galactic time frame. Then yes, suddenly.
Suddenly, this thing happened and immediately went away. Because that's how the galactic time.
Yeah. Suddenly, actually, nobody even noticed. But looking on things like a biological timescale is moderately slower than suddenly.
Correct.
Like, you don't suddenly wake up and go, oh, I have cancer. You wake up and go, oh, I've noticed it.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
So that would be, that's what I'm trying to get at with the it grows is, it's not suddenly I have superpower. It's, oh, superpower is growing to a point where I notice it now.
Yeah, possibly.
Which, again, is your whole, like, we're going to place you on observation.
Right, yeah.
Hey, did anything change?
Right.
Well, yes, my kidneys started shooting lasers into my insides. Doc, I'm real concerned.
I didn't swallow any disco balls lately. And so I know that can't be.
So it wasn't that. And, like, again... because we've chosen just the world's craziest examples. You're not gonna wake up with penguin feet. Eventually, you're gonna go, my feet look very penguinish.
Right. I mean, what you're gonna notice is my shoes don't fit.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's probably it because the changes are gonna happen slow enough that, like, what's gonna happen is you're gonna take your shoe off and your friend's gonna go, what is that? And you're gonna be like, what's what? And they're gonna be like, look at your feet. And you will not have noticed because it was a change that happened over the past 3 weeks. And you haven't seen your friend in 3 weeks.
Right.
And suddenly you got weird looking semi-penguin feet.
Right.
And they're gonna say, you gotta go to the doctor. I think you got penguin feet powers. It's going around,
you got a bad case of penguin feet, dude.
It's going around. My cousin in Alberta got penguin feet.
It's the birds in Alberta. They definitely bit him.
You gotta watch out. Wings are next, man. Use those fingers while you still can. Play all the video games. Because you ain't gonna have thumbs soon. I gotta go to the doctor.
But
Hey, is that what we're talking about? Superpowers, I think?
Yes.
Because I'm a penguin now.
So, X-Men has done this entertainingly, I believe. I think the character... I think you brought him up earlier, which is Spike. I think his powers slowly grew and grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, and he eventually, went from, I can make spikes appear in my body to, I'm
a pincushion.
Tortured ball of rocky flesh.
Right.
With spikes.
Which I believe, in all honesty, they were probably going for the cancer analog, really, in the grand scheme of things. There.
I mean, a lot of cancer analog shows up in superpower type stuff whenever it deals with genetic, because, duh.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? But yeah, to that point, that is the thing. There would be impacts. I mean, we'd come back to the, since this is now a medical issue, where probably the vast majority of these would be not positive. I mean, I would assume so, or maybe it's positive.
Presumptuously, if we are starting with, essentially we are saying that cancer is a superpower that has not yet mutated to a point of being beneficial. But one day we might get there.
That's probably a true statement in the grand scheme of things. But
it's kind of a little existentially terrifying.
It has to do with body reproduction and revitalization.
I mean, it ties into that whole thing that people like to bandy about and saying, hey, did you know that the first person to live forever has already been born? Because of the advances in medical science?
Possibly.
So, there's...
Right. Well, I mean, the whole point with cancer is its ability to unlimit, to reproduce
endlessly, which is why it's problems.
Right.
Because it's not reproducing useful stuff.
Right.
It's just endlessly reproducing.
Right. Yeah. And human cells cannot do that. And they can't do it perfectly, which is what cancer is.
Which is what cancer is.
Right. Yeah. It is a failed copying of genes in such a way that is unbeneficial and has hilariously rapid growth.
Yeah.
So,
you were saying along the lines of the cancer analog.
Oh, to jump back to that, thinking here for a second.
Yep.
Sorry.
We were talking about the monitoring and the
it
showing up.
Right. Yeah, that would just be probably a slow development. In this, actually, no, it could be either.
Yeah, because depending on the nature of the type of thing that is manifesting, it could be penguin feet or it could be you explode. And you're not just going to explode a little bit at first. It's eventually going to reach the point where the exploding will be able to happen.
Right.
And therefore just happen.
Right. And in this particular case, some of these things don't really necessarily need to have a completely normal biological background. It's superpowers, to some degree. We can only take this biological analog so far.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we are going to end up violating the conservation of mass and energy.
I mean, superpowers do that by
their
nature.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. By the nature of it being superpower, the super part triggers in, and it's just magic.
Right. But yeah, which, I mean, in that case, well, I mean, we're applying biological, trying to apply some biological rules.
We're trying to apply biological causes
right
to non-biological results.
Correct. Which is fine. It's just wonky. We have to recognize it.
Well, I mean, the problem is that, I don't want to call it a problem, but an interesting thing to note is that we have moved from looking at it medically, how would the medical community react, to looking at it medically, how.
Right. I mean, it's a fun thing. Again.
That's sort of the point of
right. We're rambling on.
Our rambly conversations, yeah. But at the end of it, or not the end of it, just the next step of it, let's be honest.
Right.
The genetic the medical take on it is very kind, I guess.
Well, we're for the sake of this example, I think we're talking about it from a time frame perspective, we're in year 50. Well, actually, we're probably like in year 5 to 20, you know, where it's, all right, here's a thing that is relatively understood that's occurring, even if we don't understand the reasoning behind it. So we're doing a monitoring thing, you know, and again, whether or not it's rampant or if it's, you know, minimum, you know, it would be, all right, we understand that there's a mechanism here that causes the thing which we are tracking, which is we have moved past the initial stage here from a time frame. So this is, again, a year 5 to 20.
Well, realistically speaking, again, we're leaning heavily on our cancer analog.
Right.
We are applying a modern interpretation and understanding of cancer to our cancer-powered superpowers.
Right.
How long have we been studying,
cancer?
Like seriously studying cancer?
I mean,
a while.
I mean, if we define seriously as how long have we known that it's existed?
2,000
years plus.
Yeah, we've known it's existed forever, but how long have we been seriously studying?
Like the treatment of it?
Yeah, the causes, the treatment, like
effectively.
Cancer study.
Yeah, effective treatment.
A thing that we call cancer study, as opposed to just, you're going to die and we're going to mitigate your loss of life.
Probably 70 years. Like, I'll note my medical knowledge here is probably not.
Yeah, I was hoping you had an actual answer because I genuinely.
I would assume the 50s because the 50s is about the time where that would be.
Seems about correct, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of serious cancer research came out of the atomic age.
Correct. Yeah, because that's when a lot of the tools to actually like identify and track things would come. So the 50s would be my answer to that question.
Yeah, a lot of the tools, a lot of the tools to identify and track, as well as a lot of the like fear mongering of like radiation causes cancer.
Right. Well, that's when we figured it out.
Yep.
And we stopped making uranium glass.
Exactly.
And I was sad.
But also,
I don't
get
want
cancer.
Now that would be a cool superpower, to be able to have uranium glass.
To be able to make glass glow.
Nah. I just to have uranium glass. Simple man, simple mutation.
The mutation is you are immune to radiation as long as it is only the amount of radiation that comes out of uranium glass.
Yep.
Anything more? Super cancer.
Yep.
Anything less?
Super cancer.
It's not the ability to have uranium glass. You need to carry it around with you.
You need the right amount of radiation.
I mean, if your eyesight's bad, which it is, because I'm looking at you, you're wearing glasses. If you properly lens your uranium glass.
Sorry, now I'm like, wait. Then I'm like, dumb Clark Kent.
Yeah, actually, it's like really close.
Yeah, really dumb Clark Kent.
You're not Superman. You're dumb Clark Kent. What's your superpower? I need to wear glasses. What? Well, they're radioactive glasses. I should probably not stand near you. Well, if I don't keep it near me, I lose all my powers. What's your powers?
Staying
living.
We keep coming back to cancer analogs all the time.
Well, I mean, it's real easy whenever we set up our premise the way we have.
Right. No. Fair enough.
Where were we?
I was going to say, how about we start moving towards a wrap-up?
There is no wrap-up. The conversation. Cancer is superpowers.
Superpowers is cancer.
We're just not there yet.
No.
Technically speaking. And at the end of the day, I mean, now we're getting into weird, and all of this allegory has an effect on the real world in this way, which is stupid and not the intent of this, but here we are. It is potential that real-world cancer, once we figure it out, could be the thing that actually leads to a superpower, which is not aging.
Correct. There's a lot of, I think, not a lot necessarily, but I know there has been research and other items around that.
I wouldn't say there's headway, but there's definitely research.
Correct. Because lots of people have noticed that cancer cells grow well.
And have noticed that cancer cells grow well because human cells stop growing well.
Correct.
So can we take the stop part out?
Yes.
And just have it be human cells grow like
well.
cancer cells.
Right.
Except
that's
not
cancer
like,
again.
Except
God,
not like cancer cells.
Again.
No, wait a minute.
Why does everything lead back to cancer?
I mean, it's like, wow, that was a sad thought I just had, actually. Never mind. I'm going to say it.
Okay.
It's sort of like the heat death of the universe, or carcinization.
Or cancerization.
I mean, that was what I meant to say.
Yes.
Well, carcinization is a different thing.
But crabs
Yes.
is cancer.
Yes.
Yes. In Latin.
Yes.
Yes.
Point is, it connects.
Yes.
All things approach
Cancer.
cancer. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's done.